Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Aldridge, the Opinion and Engagement Editor at the Cincinnati Enquirer, and I'd like to welcome you to the Enquirer's 2021 Virtual Issue 3 debate. I'll introduce our two sides here in just a moment, but before we do that, I'd quickly like to go over the format for today's debate. The debate will be broken into 5 to 6 segments, with each segment dealing with a question about issue 3. Each segment will take between 8 and 10 minutes. And the way that we'll go through the format is that each side will get an opportunity to answer the question. And then the one side that receives the question first will get a 1-minute final rebuttal. So each side will have 3 minutes to answer each question. And then whoever gets the question first will have an additional minute at the end to give a final rebuttal to each question. And we'll alternate each side so that each side will get an equal opportunity to have the final word on a question. As moderator, I will ring a bell with 10 seconds remaining in each side's answer. And that means that the proponent who is speaking or opponent who is speaking at that time will need to wrap up their answer. Each side will get an opportunity to give a 2-minute closing statement at the conclusion of our debate. And the order for this was chosen at random prior to our debate this afternoon. Before we begin, I'll introduce my colleague and the Enquirer City Hall reporter, Sharon Coolidge, who will be helping me today to ask the questions of our debaters. Good to have you here with me today, Sharon.
Happy to do this. We're in the countdown.
All right. And now let's meet the proponents and the opponents of issue 3. First, the representatives who support issue 3. Mona Jenkins, Director of Development and Operations for the Greater Cincinnati Homeless Coalition. The Reverend Nelson Pierce Jr., Senior Pastor of Beloved Community Church in Avondale. And lastly, Josh Spring, co-chair of Cincinnati Action for Housing Now. Next, representing those in opposition to issue 3, we have Renita Jones-Street, the AFSCME Regional Director. We have Pete McLinden, Executive Secretary Treasurer of the Cincinnati AFL-CIO Labor Council. And lastly, we have Matt Alter, President of the Cincinnati Firefighters Union, Local 48. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. Now, let us get started with what the people of Cincinnati have come to see and hear today. Our first question in today's debate will come from Sharon Coolidge, and the question will be posed to the yes on issue 3.
All right, here we go. Opponents say issue 3 would devastate the city budget if it passes. Why does your amendment leave so much about the funding in the air? And why didn't you specify a funding source so voters know exactly what they're getting?
Thank you. The funding for issue 3 for affordable housing is not up in the air as much as folks may like us to think. In fact, in the amendment, if you read it, you'll see that we have offered several forms of revenue, including a developer fee. This is a fee that developers would pay a small percentage of their construction cost into the trust fund. And this is the way that cities across the country fund trust funds and fund affordable housing. We have also offered a lease of the Cincinnati Southern Railway. This is something that already exists. So there's a new form of revenue and an existing form. I think the better question is, when was the last time that we heard City Council tell us that there wasn't enough money to support the development of luxury condominiums or hotels. When was the last time that we heard them say there wasn't enough for something expensive? This is about regular Cincinnatians having access to basic needs.
Yeah. Additionally, I would add to that what Josh stated, that his last statement is really the pivotal question. Asking where the money is coming from is an issue that opponents often use when they do not want to deal with the matter at hand. And the matter is that affordable housing is important. It is necessary for us to be the city that we claim to be, that we want to be, to build a Cincinnati that is equitable and that provides opportunity for all of its residents to survive and thrive. But it isn't sexy. And so it is, people overlook the votes of people who need affordable housing. And so it's easier to say we don't have money, than it is to take a serious look at the opportunities that are available, two of them that Josh named and mentioned, and what other opportunities are available in order to fund this so that we can do what needs to be done. This amendment allows for the opportunity for other donations, for people who are interested in contributing to this to do so as well. So there are multiple opportunities for funding to come. The question is, do we have the will to make this a priority in our city?
10 seconds.
We have 10, you have 10 seconds remaining in your time. So if you'd like to use that, you can take that.
Yeah, I just would simply like to reiterate the fact that we are trying to collaborate with the city, and that's why there was not a specific funding source dedicated. We wanted to leave those options open to say, hey, we know that this is an issue. Let's collaborate and figure a strategy out together.
All right, very good. The issue 3 opponents, you now have 3 minutes for your rebuttal.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Sharon, for having us on today. We look at issue 3. It's an unfunded, unworkable solution. It does create a budget crisis, putting $50 million plus a year into the trust fund. And when you look at the revenue sources, it's too restrictive. When you look at other housing trusts and the sources of revenue they have, I mean, you're looking at 20 to 25 other revenue sources. Here, the proponents have specifically limited it to 4 sources. The railway lease, which is already part of the capital budget, so that's not new. That's already being used. Developer fees, which might bring in some money, but not $50 million a year plus. Taxing income tax on stock options. We're not sure if that's legal, and that would have to go to a vote by the people. And lastly, the general fund and capital budget. It's too much. It puts too much reliance on the general operating fund and the capital fund budget. And for proponents to say that they can find the money, that this won't affect jobs, this won't affect public services, is just really unrealistic and fiscally irresponsible. I mean, all 3 major political parties, the Republicans, the Democrats, and Charterites, have all come out against this because we all know that there is a better solution. Collaboratively, we need to follow what the List report said and find new dedicated funding streams, not robbing Peter to pay Paul, not cutting services that people depend on, like fire, like health department, like garbage collection. We shouldn't be putting those at risk. And I'd leave the time now to Matt or Renita to respond.
Yeah, I would just want to add that we hear a lot from our opponents that it's a scare tactic. And, the 3 of us has been in this business a long time. We've negotiated multiple contracts with the city of Cincinnati, and we don't fall for scare tactics. It's about the math. Numbers are numbers. Numbers don't lie. 2 + 2 will always be 4. So whereas we are in favor of affordable housing and would do anything and work very hard to assure that we can come up with a dedicated funding source, this issue 3 is just not the answer.
And I would like to echo what both Pete and my sister Renita said in that. And additionally, I think going back to the original question is that's just as a no dedicated revenue stream was put down there. If it was felt that it could be done with a developer fee or could be done, then that should say specifically, here's what the developer fee is, here's how much it's going to be, and put that out there for the public to vote on. But throwing out quote unquote options is not being genuine. Thank you.
All right, and now closing out our first question, you'll get 1 more minute for the pro issue 3 side. You have 60 seconds to rebut the rebuttal.
So here's the question. Go ahead.
I'll start by saying I understand the concern of Pete and Renita and our friends in labor. People are concerned about their jobs, and understand that concern. Issue 3 is not a threat to people's jobs. Issue 3 can produce jobs. Issue 3 is a way that we can work together to make the city better and stronger and safer. And what we need is people coming to the table willing to negotiate in seriousness and earnest in order to make this happen. And I'll let Josh go ahead and close us out.
We have to ask ourselves, what do we believe? What do we see in front of us? Pete mentions that all 3 parties have come out against this. That's no surprise. Wouldn't we expect more of the same? That's why we went to the people.
All right, thank you. Our next question. If you're against this first question will go to our opponents of issue 3. If you are against this plan to create more affordable housing in Cincinnati, what should the city do instead? What concrete steps do you propose to move this issue forward? And what is a plan that you would support? So our no on issue 3, folks, you have 3 minutes to address that.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And that's what everyone is asking us. If you're against this, what are you for? We're for more collaborative action. We're more cooperating together, bringing subject matter experts to the table, bringing stakeholders, all stakeholders to the table, even those we may not agree with. But this has got to be a comprehensive approach to a complex problem. We've got to look at federal funding. We've got to look at state funding. We've got to, make those calls and say, come on, come to the table. County, what will you put in? State housing trust, what will you put in? But it's got to be a collaborative approach. And that's what issue 3, the way it's written, is lacking. As my sister Renita said, we support affordable housing and we want a workable solution we all can be on board with. But we need a board that's going to be more diverse and inclusive. Have somebody from the faith community, have somebody from the labor community, have someone from the business community. We've got to bring all the voices to the table if we're going to make this work, and we're going to defeat this problem. And we can do it. We've shown it with the bus levy when we all come together. We've passed the preschool promise twice together. Collectively, we're stronger together than working apart or separate.
And I would just add, we're labor. We're all about big ideas. Every big idea that has been generated in this country has had the support of labor. So we will get behind whatever needs to be done to ensure that we have affordable housing in Cincinnati. We live here, we work here, our members live here and work here. And so we have motivation to get this done. We're not anti-affordable housing. We're just anti-issue 3 and this plan.
And I would add, when labor is involved in this, we're going to ensure, working with our brothers and sisters in the building trades, that we're also providing job opportunities and skills and providing things like apprenticeship programs to provide skills. There's a huge shortage in the construction industry for good paying jobs to build this new housing, and to ensure that it's not developers who are in the market right now developing affordable housing, but that we're providing opportunities to women, minority owned businesses to do this housing. And again, to work with all the stakeholders, all the neighborhoods, all 52 neighborhoods in the city, to make this a workable option for all residents and not just a select few.
Very nice. We'll now pass the question over to our yes on issue for 3 folks. Why is your proposal the right one? Why is it better?
So I'll go ahead and start. This is not as complex as it should be. And this is not new. We've been waiting for far too long. Dr. King said, justice delayed is justice denied. Too many people have suffered under what the existing process has been. We are talking about livelihood. We are talking about jobs. We are talking about living. People are dying under the current circumstances. And so there is a need to do something. This Affordable Housing Trust Fund was approved in 2018. We asked then for a reliable source of funding. We asked then for an oversight. And here we are 3 years later, post-COVID, which has done nothing but basically highlighted this and created the greater need for us to be bold in how we move forward with this. And I'm going to allow time for either Josh or Reverend Nelson to speak too.
The fact is that it's not complex, and you know that. People watching know this. Folks in our thousands of households are struggling to keep a roof over their heads and their children's heads. It's not complex. We have been investing in luxury housing for years and years and years, and it is high time that we invest in regular Cincinnatians, that we don't favor a few neighborhoods, but we favor all of our neighborhoods. They want us to think it's complex, but it's very simple. You just look at what's going on around you. It's very simple.
And I would just close by saying the reason that this plan is better, number one, is because this plan is before us now. Nobody has put forth a plan. They want to talk about coming to the table, but they've been invited to this table. People refuse to come. They refuse to show up and refuse to talk about this. And so we sat down with experts and created the best possible plan we have moving forward. It's a plan that allows for people to invest in it. It is a plan that is open and allows people to still come to the table, because we understand that this issue will need to be worked through moving forward, and we will need to work together collaboratively with City Council and with our brothers and sisters in labor in order to make this happen. And so this process still allows room for people to come and inform it. And we can choose to put this into place this Tuesday.
All right, we'll give our opponents of issue 3 the final word on this question. You'll get 60 seconds to finish up.
Thank you. As we've seen in the list report, this is a complex issue, and it needs a dedicated new revenue stream, and it needs comprehensive collaborative effort. We've got to look at our federal leaders, we've got to look at our state leaders and ask them for their support and their input. We've got to look at our county leaders, our city leaders. We can do this. But when you limit your table, because we weren't invited to the table beforehand, and we won't be invited to the table if this passes. The board structure they have overseeing this has 11 members, 7 of which come from 2 coalitions, which Mr. Josh Springs is a part of. Again, we don't think that's diverse. We don't think that's inclusive. You've got to have all stakeholders at the table. It may be a real estate developer. It may be someone from business. But that's how we're going to effectively come to a workable paid solution for affordable housing.
All right. Our next question will come from Sharon Coolidge, and that will go to our yes for issue 3.
You project the amendment would create an average of 500 units of affordable housing each year. With a $50 million minimum annual investment, that's an average of $100,000 per unit. Is that a good return on investment?
$100,000 per unit is an average estimate. In fact, it does not take into account the outside dollars that this will leverage. When we talk with our friends at the Apartment Association, they said, we think that you're going low. We think this will generate 1,000 units a year. The fact is that, yes, it is a extremely useful return on investment. Last year, more than 142 people died in our community, died young, average age of 49 years old. In the last 5 years, we're over 600 people dead. That is higher than our homicide rate. We have more people who die from homelessness than from gunshots in the city of Cincinnati. We cannot make an investment in anything more important than human life.
I would add to that, affordable housing is one of the foundational issues that undergird so many of the issues that we are wrestling with as a city. Affordable housing will reduce our crime rate. Affordable housing will improve students' ability to perform well in school. The issues that we care about, that we are concerned about, affordable housing will make all of those issues better and make it easier to navigate and solve those problems. That is the most worthwhile investment we could make, is to invest in something that will make the city exponentially better.
The fact is that I'm not sure why we remember things differently, but we met with Pete and his staff before this was ever put into amendment language, because labor is important. But we understand that the city manager threatened the jobs of so many important workers. And we believe that despite how it looks, we believe that we are still united with labor. We believe that when enough folks come out on the 4th to pass this, that we will stand beside and with labor, and we will say, we are going to invest in affordable housing, and we are not going to hurt our city workers. We can do both. We should not be tricked into believing we can't.
All right, we'll pass it over to our no on issue 3 folks for their rebuttal.
Well, I agree with Josh. We stand with him on the affordable housing. We stand with our community partners, but that return is insufficient. And we'll be working on this for decades without coming to a solution. If you look at the LISC report and all its recommendations and strategic actions, it's talking about 2,000 affordable units a year. And your colleague, Hannah Sparling, did a very good article yesterday in the Enquirer, where she looked at other experiences of other housing trusts, specifically Columbus, which has over $100 million in its trust fund, and it's built up over 200 years, not because it's throwing money at a problem, because it's offering low-cost loans to people who may not be able to get loans through the traditional banking services, but they're getting low-cost loans and they're getting a return on their investments. So they can take those dollars and put them back out to the community. So again, building $100,000 houses is not going to, it's a drop in the bucket. We need to do better. We need to be more collaborative, and we need a better return on public investment dollars or public dollars.
In the city of Cincinnati, the city manager per the charter serves as the CEO of the city of Cincinnati. And as my sister Renita said earlier, I don't think anybody on this panel has more experience battling City Hall than the 3 of us on the no side. This is what we do. We're very familiar with this. This is a very real threat. I'm going on 10 years as the president of Local 48, and this is probably one of the scariest proposals that I've seen to this point. The very same folks that make the calls on the folks that Josh spoke about that are experiencing homelessness and lost their life as a result of homelessness, directly or indirectly, those are the calls that we make. That's your firefighters and your paramedics. That's your home health care nurses. That's your code enforcement officers ensuring that the housing that is there is up to code. That's the sanitarians that are out there ensuring that we have clean, healthy places to eat, and to work, and in many places to stay. Many of the services that are provided to serve our community most at risk in our underserved communities, those very same folks are going to be without a job should this pass. Those aren't threats. Those are educating the public on very real consequences of what's going to happen if we if this passes, then the city is forced to take between 12.5% and 15% of the general fund budget, which at this point in time has been the only real source of where this money would come from. Basic services will be slashed, and what we see as citizens on our day-to-day basis, we will feel the effects of this.
And I just can't express enough. I feel like we need to continue to keep saying that we're not anti-affordable housing. We just believe that with enough time and everybody coming together, we can come up with a better solution.
All right, and we'll give 60 seconds for the final word on this question. Back to the yes on issue 3, folks.
Yeah. So there's a story that accurately describes what our politics is like so much right now. And that is, there are two people sitting at a table. There is a worker and there is somebody experiencing poverty. And a wealthy person comes to the table and takes all the cookies off the table and leaves one. And then leans over to the worker and says, that poor person is eyeing your cookie. And this is exactly what is happening right now. Is that people in City Hall are trying to galvanize labor against this issue, not because they believe labor is against affordable housing, but because they can threaten labor with their jobs. But it's not issue 3 that's the threat. It's the people in City Hall, and we have a chance to fix that come November. So let's pass issue 3 on Tuesday and go fix City Hall in November.
All right. Thank you, Reverend Pierce. Moving on to our next question, which will go to the opponents of issue 3. There's a lot of talk about how issue 3 could harm the city's budget. But what is to stop elected officials from creating new revenue streams for affordable housing? Why do you assume this money would come from the general fund?
So I'll take
Excellent question, Kevin. Go ahead, Matt.
So when we look at the revenue sources, and as Pete spoke about earlier, let's start, with the lease of the railway that the city of Cincinnati owns. That money is already incorporated into the capital fund budget. It's restricted dollars. Capital fund, for those folks that don't know what that is, that's things like sidewalks, streets, fixing up our parks, making sure that we maintain our health clinics, our dental clinics, our senior centers, our rec centers, the firehouses that your firefighters are in. There's 26 firehouses. Half the neighborhoods have one. That is what the capital budget's used for, as well as for things like replacing garbage trucks and fire trucks and ambulances and so many of those important things. That's where that money goes to. The other 0.1% of that money goes towards the Smale Commission, again, also used for capital, what's called restricted capital funds, again, for replacing physical items within the city. That money's already being stretched thin. The fire department's budget for capital has already been slashed by almost 3/4 just in the last 3 years, as we've seen the economic downturn as the results of COVID. So what we're left with is the operating budget, which is 1.55%, the lowest in the state of Ohio. Is there an opportunity to expand that? Perhaps, but that has to go before the voters. Again, this is putting the cart before the horse. We agree. We all agree. The firefighters agree that affordable housing is a critical issue. We see this more than many folks. We live in firehouses. They're called firehouses for a reason, because we live in the communities. We're a part of the community. That's what our calls for service are, to support the community, and taking funds, these dollars that are already very restricted, that are already tight on the money, and demanding before any program in the city funds this before we fund any other program, quite honestly, is irresponsible. And the impacts will be very, very drastic on what the citizens see from day to day.
And to go with what Matt said, if you look at the language of issue 3, that's one of the most unworkable pieces of issue 3 is the language restrictions on where the money can come from. Again, there are 20 to 25 different sources that you can have new dedicated revenue streams, but it specifically says it can only come from these 4 sources, which is really 3 because one already is in the capital budget. And we just think it's way too restrictive. We should be opening up, giving the city more flexibility, not putting the city in a straitjacket. The general fund has had some issues. It's not grown over the years. And as Renita and Matt know, we've seen for the last 15 years, we've gone through recessions, We've seen sales income tax dip. We've gone through job cuts. We've gone through budget cuts. I mean, many of our departments are running on very thin line budgets to provide good services to the public. Putting $50 million annually on top of that as a deficit is going to have a disastrous effect on the city.
All right. Our yes on issue 3 folks will have their opportunity to rebut on this question.
This narrative that there is not enough, that we can't do better, is coming squarely from politicians inside of City Hall. It's coming squarely from the city administration. But we know that we can do better and we must do better. The fact is that issue 3's funding sources are anything but restrictive. The developer fee, which we believe can generate $20 million annually, that alone, that is used by municipalities across the country to build and preserve affordable housing. We've got to be at least as smart as cities across the country. One of the items we list is the city's general fund and capital budget. That's not listed. Neither of those can grow larger. Pull from exactly what is there today. We're saying exactly what Pete says of revenue. There might be ones that folks out there have ideas of this year, next year, 5 years from now that we haven't thought of yet, or that will be newly available in a few years that aren't now. We can bring in new revenue. All of the ideas that you have, when that money comes in, it comes in through the general fund, which is why it's listed, or it comes in through the capital budget, which is why it's listed. The railroad lease, that money, yes, it goes in the capital budget, and the capital budget funds the items mentioned, but the railroad money does not specifically go to those items. And the fact is, we don't have time to wait. We don't have time to have more people die. We don't have time for more of our children. We have 3,000 kids in CPS that don't have a home tonight. How much longer do they have to wait? How much longer do those children have to wait? When has enough time passed and enough suffering passed to where we say we will prioritize affordable housing in the city of Cincinnati? How much time?
On a daily,
go ahead, Mona.
I just want to add to that. On a daily, I get calls where people are having to make that choice between getting the medication for diabetes, for heart health, paying for school expenses, over housing. It should not be a either or. It should be an all. And the way that we can address that is by ensuring that we have affordable housing. Go ahead, Nelson.
Yeah, I would just close by saying scripture says without a vision, the people perish. We can have a vision for a broader sources of revenue if we are willing to work together towards that.
Thank you, Reverend Pierce. The last word on this question, back to our opponents of issue 3. You have 60 seconds.
And again, I disagree with my friend and brother Josh. We got to stop the finger pointing. We got to stop the division and the anger that I see from the other side. We've got to take the politics out of this. We got to stop pointing the fingers at our city leaders. You know, we put up yard signs and we put up signs all across the city, and we tell you, just on our Union Building in Bond Hill, our no on issue 3 sign was ripped down from our building. We've heard stories of our signs and yards being ripped down. That's undemocratic. It's un-American, and it's against the law. We need to come together, all of us, and fix affordable housing. But going a one-way, our way, or the highway routine is just not going to work. Again, we need to be together on this, and we need to be more collaborative and more cooperative.
All right, our next question will come from Sharon Cooley.
You know, I'd like to follow up on something that Pete just brought up, and we're talking about the politics of this. I think it's impossible to take out the politics since we're talking about City Hall. Has City Hall done enough? I feel like that's what brought us to this issue. We talk about affordable housing, and the question I was going to ask is, why are we relying on this 28,000 shortage number? But I think the question really should pivot to, has City Hall done enough? And has it brought us to this moment? And I mean, maybe everyone could just take a minute to answer that.
So many times, and folks know this, so many times, we have gone to City Hall, we have spoken in front of City Council with people pouring their hearts out saying, look, the investment you're making in this tax abatement, the owner is forcing me out of my home. Or we need to do something about evictions because I can't keep a roof over my children's heads. Or we need funding for shelter. We have just kept over and over. Every year we put out the number of people who have died young because of homelessness. And that level of urgency just hasn't reached City Hall. We've been there, but it hasn't reached City Hall. And so, we just looked at it and said, look, enough is enough. If City Hall doesn't get it, then we've got to go to the people. And that's what we're going to do on the 4th. We have to go to the people. If the politicians aren't caught up yet, that's all right. We, the people, can move forward. We, the people, can invest in our own neighborhoods, in our own people. 41% of Cincinnati households would benefit directly from this trust fund. 41%. That is the income ranges in here. We're talking about folks with an income of $34,000 a year or less. 41% of us.
I would say on the issue of politics that what people are looking for is an end to partisan bickering that leads to no solutions. What we are offering here is a solution. And the fact that we have a disagreement on it means that we should be engaged in these type of conversations. And we get to put it to the people. I'm sorry that Pete and his people have experienced this kind of pushback. But that pales in comparison to the people who are couch surfing because they don't know where they are going to live. To people who are and who have been waiting in desperate need of affordable housing. And so we have a chance to move on an issue, on a solution, not to have endless conversations, but to move forward. And Sharon, I think the question that you posed is the right question. We've been waiting on the city to do this for far too long. And since the city has not moved, we are taking it to the people because we, the people, have a chance to make a difference in our city.
Same question will now go to the opponents of issue 3.
I just respond, affordable housing, it's not a city problem, it's a regional problem. This isn't just City Hall's fault. I think we should be talking to our congressman, Steve Shabbat and Brad Winstrup. Why are you not standing up for more funding for housing, for metropolitan housing? We should be talking to our Republican supermajorities in Columbus. Why are you not helping us with our affordable housing problem? Why aren't you giving more dollars? Why aren't you letting up on giving us back the local government funds? Why are you restricting our ability of local governments to raise funds? Again, we understand this problem very well, but putting a $50 million plus liability on the city budget every year in perpetuity, we think is just an unfundable, unworkable solution. We know we can do better, and working together, we will do better. But the way issue 3 is written, it's just not going to work. And it's going to cause a huge budget crisis, and it will cause a loss of public services, and will cost a lot of jobs.
And no, we do not believe that City Hall has done enough for affordable housing. We have no problem saying that publicly, privately, or to them individually. We do not object to the intentions of issue 3. It's the plan. It's big ideas require sustainable, dedicated funding sources. And this does not give that.
Putting people out of work, especially specifically to my sister Renita and the folks that she represents with AFSCME. Some of the folks that we're talking about are folks that would they would fall into the category where they would qualify for affordable housing, and they stand united with us on voting no on this. Putting folks out of work, putting people out of jobs. There are very acute needs in the city of Cincinnati. Affordable housing is one of them, but we also have very critical needs that we deal with every day. The same folks that are providing vaccinations and home health care nurses and lunches to the youth and the kids of our communities, where sometimes the only meal they receive in the day is at our rec centers. Closing rec centers, getting rid of home health care nurses and the sanitarians and waste removal and getting rid of recycling and laying off firefighters and others is not the solution. Don't disagree with the fact that City Council hasn't done enough. Certainly, there's an influx of money, and we've seen some progress within the last few weeks. So I will commend the yes on 3 folks that you've finally made woken the politicians up and made them work on some issues. But again, taking the money and laying people off and cutting city services in order to fund this is not the solution.
Very good. We'll give the last word on this particular question to our yes on issue 3 group. 60 seconds.
So I want to say that, yes, we agree that things need to be handled on the federal, state, and local level. And it is political because of the fact that redlining originated not only from the private sector, but from the government itself. We are emphasizing local because we are local, right? And when we are consistently saying that Black Lives Matter, but yet when we are 50% of the population, but yet 70% of the folks experiencing homelessness are Black, that's not racial equity. We're leaving out that lens in a lot of this. So often I hear that our children are so resilient. And part of resilience is the fact that you have to go through some type of difficulty first. Our children should not have to go through that difficulty to be recognized as resilient. They should be seen as brilliant. And part of that is having housing that allows them to be their best person that they can be.
All right, thank you. Our next question will go to the opponents of issue 3 first. A common criticism in the amendment is a lack of faith in the oversight board. Can you explain some of the concerns that you have about the oversight board and why?
Again, I would answer, when you look at the board as the way it's set up, it's not democratic. It's very inclusive, it's very exclusive, not inclusive. 11-person board, 7 of which come from Josh's organizations. Again, that they tell city council, this is who we want and this is who you're going to approve. That's unlike any other board in this city, and unlike any other trust fund board I've seen across the country. Again, that board needs to be more inclusive. It's got to have elected leaders. It's got to have people from the faith community, people from labor, people from the homeless coalition, people from affordable housing. I would definitely want someone from the list, Greater Cincinnati, on that. We got to bring the subject matter experts in. It's a very limited board that has massive control over 10 years. Will be over $500 million of public dollars, taxpayer dollars. Again, we need a better oversight and governing structure, and we need more voices at the table so we can come to the best solution for affordable housing.
And I think there should also be some concern about the makeup of the board because of the shenanigans that have gone on at City Hall in the last years and a half or so. All city employees are required to complete ethics training prescribed by the state of Ohio, and we've done that. And the simple definition of ethics is the ability, taking public dollars and serving on a board that will then dole those public dollars out. And if your organization is the direct beneficiary of it, it's forbidden. It's an ethics violation. So there's concern on how this is going to support these organizations and communities when they will sit on the board and basically have the complete control over the $50 million on where it goes. Not to mention the fact that 5% of that $50 million is held back every year for administration of the funds. So $2.5 million is going to be held back just for, quote unquote, administering the Affordable Housing Trust as deemed necessary by the unelected board. I think there is great concern about accountability and how the voters can hold those members that are on this board accountable when they don't have any say-so on who is on the board.
All right, we'll give an opportunity for rebuttal to that question to our yes on issue 3 folks. And as you answer that question, could you, in your answer, explain why you formed the board the way you did? For example, why are there no term limits for members and things of that nature?
I think it's important to put this in context. So this board, an oversight board, is not completely dissimilar from other existing boards. So we think of the Board of Health, Park Board, the Recreation Commission, Planning Commission, and others. And as the main difference between those boards and this one is that those boards, majority of their membership is appointed by the mayor, by one person. And the question is, how many of us out there feel like we have a connection to any of those boards? How many of us out there feel like, yeah, I could call up somebody from the Park Board or the Board of Health and have some input, or maybe I could serve on them? How many of us feel that way? How many of us feel like we could approach the mayor and get that position? This board would be different because we have community organizations who nominate the participants, and then city council votes on them. This means that you, as a regular person, could serve on these boards. You could have very few degrees of separation. You can easily be a part of deciding who are on these boards instead of one person deciding. You can decide. That is democratic. That is different from the status quo. And we just believe that regular Cincinnatians should be involved in the functioning of the government. And then we will have less of the corruption that Matt mentioned.
I just want to add, there's a difference between oversight and control. That our opponent said that this board would control the money, and there's a substantive difference in that. As Josh said, this process is extremely democratic. The people have a voice to choose the city council people, the city council members who get to vote on and make the decisions. This boards will be holding accountable the people who are democratically elected. And we are choosing to select the people who will be doing the holding people accountable, people who have the most experience with and dealing with people who are experiencing homelessness, people who have been closest to the problem. Because when people who are closest to the problems are an integral part of creating the solutions, we come up with better, more effective solutions. This is what equity is all about. It's about making sure that the solutions we come up with address the problems that we face.
All right, our opponents of issue 3 will have 60 seconds to have the final word on this question.
I just want to make sure that we have accurate information being provided. The mayor do not appoint any boards within the city of Cincinnati. He makes a recommendation to city council, and city council has the sole responsibility of approving those appointments or not approving those appointments. So I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on what that process looks like.
Yes, and regular citizens can apply. You apply with the mayor's office, and he sends those applications to the city council. They review it, and they choose who they want based on the mayor's recommendation as well. So you can be part of the process, and I agree with Reverend Pierce. We want everybody to be part of the solution. Homeless people, people with affordable housing issues, but we also want other people at that table. All people should be at the table, not just a select few, if we want more accountability of this board.
All right, our next question will come from Sharon Coolidge, and it will go to the yes on issue 3 folks.
If this issue passes, and the one thing that we have here with the 6 of you is you are all experts on the city budget. You know, we can't expect the average citizen to be an expert on where the nooks and crannies of the city budget is. And we all know there is money hidden in the cushions over there, but I'm not sure it's $50 million. But my question is, if you had to make this decision for the budget, where would you take the money?
If we were city council, we would pass a developer fee like hundreds of other municipalities across the country. We would utilize a portion of the railroad lease funds, and we would, some of it's already there. We would take 25% of the tax increment financing, which we have already done. And with those 3 sources, we could fund the trust fund. That's one way to get it done.
I think Josh has stated it precisely for us. That's exactly what we would do if we were city council, is taking those revenue streams and then look towards where are other places that we can create it, where we can create new revenue streams. In addition, we would be sitting and talking with our philanthropic community to talk about where we can raise philanthropic dollars to help fund this as well.
And let's not forget that recently the city of Cincinnati has made a big deal of saying that that they're going to seek $30 million in donations from corporate Cincinnati. While that may not be our exact tactic, if they believe they can get that enough that they're holding press conferences about it, well, we're already 2/3 of the way there, right? Because that is an allowable source in what we have written here and what we will vote on the 4th.
And I agree with what Josh and Reverend Nelson have said. And again, this goes towards these are just initial ideas. It is going to take long-term work, and additional funding sources could come down the line. But this is what we're currently working with, right? So these are some of our options, and these are some of the best suggestions. But this is also why we're working with other organizations who have done this work as well. AHA and Mark and all of those who have who are in our coalitions, and those who are working directly with folks who have experienced this, who are close to that problem, and we believe that they are going to be the ones who offer some of that solutions.
All right, we'll give an opportunity to the opponents to respond to what you just heard.
Again, Sharon, this is a question that goes right to the center of the problem with issue 3. We need new dedicated revenue streams. We've got to rewrite the whole thing, because the language is very restrictive. These are your 4 revenue sources. And a legal notion we all know in the legal field is the inclusion of one thing leads to the exclusion of others. So when you say 4 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can't come in later and say, well, what about 5? Well, what about this? No, you have 4 things. That's why it's way too restrictive on city council's ability to raise new funds, to go out and find matching grants. That's one of the biggest fallacies of this issue, and the misunderstandings is once you write that language into the city charter, the only way you can change it is to go back and do another charter amendment. City council can't change that. And that again, we need to rewrite the whole revenue stream so we have new dedicated sources, not hope something comes down the line or hope they figure out a solution later on.
I think it's also important to remember that 70% of the city's budget comes from income tax. That's where the money comes from. So when projects come from other sources of revenue that are already earmarked, I think the question should be asked, what services are you willing to cut? What current programs that are offered by the city right now to support so many people that are experiencing homelessness or that are in a vulnerable state? What programs would you cut from them? And how are we also going to increase, either the income tax or the amount of money that's generated by it? Just based off of current numbers today, not in the future, but current numbers today, it would take 64,000 new jobs with an average of a $50,000 a year income in order to produce a $50 million a year in new income taxes. It's a huge number. And again, when you're taking money from one pot, the question has to be asked, what is going to be sacrificed at that? The work that our nurses and so many of the folks that I've said multiple times that they do serve the same population that this proposes to help. We're not against affordable housing. It's just how it's being funded. If there was a clearly identified funding source as part of this charter amendment, I can tell you this right now, we wouldn't be here today. The firefighters wouldn't be here today talking about it, because as long as it's not cutting the firefighters and the job that we do and cutting the budget and cutting the work of the nurses and our fellow city employees to make sure we have what we need to do to our job, we wouldn't be here today. We all agree that affordable housing is necessary in the city of Cincinnati, and it is a critical issue.
All right, we'll give the final 60 seconds on this question and the final 60 seconds of this debate to the yes on issue 3 folks.
Please, Cincinnatians, we just have to use our own common sense. This idea that, read the amendment. The amendment is available at actionforhousingnow.com. The amendment includes one of those 4 funding mechanisms is the general fund in the capital budget. And that has been reframed to mean that we believe that we should be pulling this money from only existing sources. That is not the case. The fact is that we are calling on the city of Cincinnati to be at least as creative in funding affordable housing as we are when it comes to funding condominiums and stadiums. Be at least as creative for our regular folks, for our hardworking people.
And we're used to cuts because while human services is only 1% of the budget, we're usually the first one that is facing the cuts. So, and we also have the earnings tax that was listed on there. So that's an option. So again, we don't have to cut jobs. We have ways, and it's listed in the charter.
Thank you. So I misspoke. Those weren't the last 60 seconds of the debate. They were the last 60 seconds of our questions in the debate, because each side will get 2 minutes to make their final closing statement. And as I mentioned at the top, we randomly chose the order in which they would go. And so the no on issue 3 folks will get the first 2 minutes, and then the yes on issue 3 folks will get to make the final 2-minute statement. So it's your time, 2 minutes, no on issue 3.
And thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Sharon, for having us today. To quote our great President Joe Biden, here's the deal. Despite the best intentions of the affordable housing advocates on issue 3 language, issue 3 is an unfunded, unworkable solution that's going to have disastrous consequences on the city budget, especially city public services and jobs. Cincinnati, we deserve a better solution for affordable housing. Working more collaboratively, we will get a better solution. But the impacts that this will have, creating an annual general fund deficit of $50 million or more, a threat to our Cincinnati retirement system, which is already on edge with thousands of city employees and retirees affected, the city's bond rating and ability to borrow money to fund projects. The uncertainty this would create would certainly reduce economic development and redevelopment in the city. It's not a workable solution that we need. Cincinnati deserves better, and we can do better working together. And I would ask you please to vote no on issue 3 because we can do better, and we will do better on May 5th.
This isn't a comfortable position for firefighters to be in. This isn't our MO. We like to work behind the scenes. We're here to provide service for you, regardless of where you live, what you look like, or who you love, or how much you earn. But this is important enough to know that we can't risk losing potentially 90 to 100 plus firefighters closing firehouses. We encourage the residents to vote no on issue 3, get back to the table, put something forth that has a funding source to it, not just a lot of maybes and what ifs, but a dedicated revenue stream that doesn't impact and doesn't hurt current services and current city employees. Vote no on issue 3.
Thank you. And now we will have the final closing statement that will come from the yes on issue 3 folks. You have 2 minutes.
In addition to the Homeless Coalition, the Affordable Housing Advocates, and Metropolitan Area Religious Coalition, issue 3 is endorsed by a number of groups who have not fallen to the fear that is being put out there. That includes the NAACP, the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, the Urban League, Communities United for Action, Housing Opportunities Made Equal, just to name a few.
My fiance is at least a 4th generation Cincinnatian and a graduate of Walnut Hills, and a director at one of Cincinnati's leading national nonprofits. And she spent many of her childhood years experiencing homelessness. And while many people would look at her story and listen to it and talk about how strong she is, and some might even use her story to talk about how great Cincinnati is, she would tell you that no child should have to live through the challenges that she went through, having to focus on learning while wondering every day how her basic needs were going to get met. She would tell you that there are far too many other kids that she knew whose potential and skill and intelligence was squandered due to their housing instability, and that our city is worse off as a result. And so in less than a week, on May 4th, we get a chance to decide what type of city do we want to be. We want a city that is dominated by the politics of fear, by empty threats about what might happen? Or do we want to be a city that steps forward with courage and faith to shape a better future? Do we want to be a city that writes reports about how bad things are and does nothing about it? Or that steps forward to make a change? You can make the first step to making this city better and more equitable by voting yes on issue 3.
Thank you. Both the proponents of issue 3 and the opponents of issue 3 for joining us here today in this debate and shedding more light and giving more information to voters so that they can make the best choice when they go to the polls on May the 4th. And I'll say the same thing following this debate that I said after our mayoral debate last week, that voters of Cincinnati have a great choice before them. And they have a great right and a responsibility, and that being the right to vote. Some estimates project that we may only have about 15% voter turnout. I said that's unconscionable for a city like Cincinnati with so much promise, with so much hope, and with so many big issues left on the table. We'll be electing a new mayor to lead our city. We'll be electing a new city council to help in that process. And of course, this affordable housing charter amendment, as well as the 2 anti-corruption charter amendments that are on the ballot as well, are critical issues for this city. So it is my hope that everyone listening, everyone who is of age and registered to vote will exercise that right on May the 4th. It would be a shame that if only 15% of those who are eligible to vote for the city would decide such an important issue like the one that we've been discussing here today. On behalf of the Enquirer's editor, Burl Love, my colleague, Sharon Coolidge, and all of the staff, editors, and managers at the Cincinnati Enquirer, I thank you for joining us here today for this important discussion. And please, please vote on May the 4th. Have a great day.